Hello, I'm Natasha. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about the arguments put forward by the academic John Mearsheimer, as well as adding my own research regarding the current conflict in Ukraine and the principal causes of this conflict. In order to analyse John's arguments, I will try and use factual evidence and historical context. I have reviewed quite a number of John's videos in order to be able to summarise his arguments in this video. I intend to split this series into two separate videos since there is quite a lot of information to include. First off, I think that it is important to note that Vladimir Putin regards Russians and Ukrainians as one people, a single whole, and his decision to launch the current military operation would not have been taken lightly. I also want to draw attention to the fact that Russia under Vladimir Putin has never been what I deem to be an aggressive country. They oppose conflicts in both Iraq, Libya, and Syria. Now, people may bring up Georgia. However, this conflict did revolve around the issue of NATO expansion, which brings me to my first point, and one which is raised by John, that Russia's military operation was a reaction to NATO's expansion eastwards. And factually speaking, this is correct. NATO has expanded eastwards. Since 1949, NATO's membership has increased from 12 to 32 countries through 10 rounds of enlargement. Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic became NATO members in 1999. In 2004, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia became members. Then Albania and Croatia joined in 2009. Montenegro became a member in 2017 and North Macedonia in 2020. This was despite promises by the West given to the then President Gorbachev that NATO would not expand eastwards, although this was never written down. NATO in the 2008 Bucharest summit also opened the door to both Georgia and Ukraine one day joining NATO, which Russia considered to be a red line. So why would Russia see this as a threat, a military alliance approaching its borders? Well, if we take a look at the past history of the Soviet Union, in World War II, the Soviet Union was invaded by Nazi Germany. On June 22, 1941, over 3 million German troops invaded the Soviet Union in 3 offensives. 3 phases through German-occupied Poland and Ukraine. Clearly, border security would be a key concern for Russia, given how it was invaded in World War II. I think that it is vital to note that 27 million people died in World War II in the former Soviet Union. 27 million, that's nearly half the population of the UK, which is why I personally find it outrageous that Russia's security concerns are not given the respect that they deserve. Now, Western commentators refer to the fact that, well, Russia doesn't need to worry because NATO is a defensive organisation. But let's consider that for a moment. If we look at NATO's actions in the past in Libya, the former Yugoslavia, Iraq, these countries never posed a threat to the US or its NATO allies, but they were attacked by NATO. NATO bombed the former Yugoslavia for 78 days. They targeted civilian infrastructure, hospitals, and schools. In the case of Libya, American and British naval forces fired over 110 Tomahawk cruise missiles and imposed a naval blockade. NATO's actions certainly to me do not seem defensive, they seem threatening, and I can understand why Russia would see this as a threat. I do think that NATO's expansion is a valid concern for Russia, and one of Russia's key concerns now is the neutrality of Ukraine. Now, many people will come back and say, well, Ukraine is a sovereign country. It can decide whether it joins NATO or not. And to that, I would say, really? If, say, Scotland or Ireland want to decide with Russia or China, do you think that would be allowed to happen? Absolutely not. As John mentions, there is something called the Monroe Doctrine. Now, this doctrine states that no great power from Europe or Asia is allowed to form a military alliance in the neighbourhood of the United States. If you live next to a great power, then you need to be careful when choosing who you associate with. Just like neighbours living on a street need to respect each other, so too should countries. I would like to bring attention to the fact that Cuba in 1962 did not have the right to put Soviet missiles on its bases. So the same security concerns that the US once had, so too should apply to Russia. Now, some people will respond to this line of argument and suggest, well, no, Vladimir Putin is an imperialist, just like Hitler, and he wants to conquer the whole of Europe. But I don't think there are any facts or evidence to support this. Prior to 2014, Russia had no interest in Ukraine. As Vladimir Putin commented in his letter on the 12th of July 2021, and I am paraphrasing here, the Russian Federation not only recognised, but indeed did a lot for Ukraine to establish itself as an independent country. Throughout the difficult 1990s and in the new millennium, it provided considerable support to Ukraine. From 1991 to 2013, Ukraine's budget savings amounted to more than 82 billion US dollars, while today it holds a mere 1.5 billion US dollars of Russian payments for gas transit to Europe. In 2014, Ukraine conducted the most amount of trade with Russia. Russia was its highest import partner. This is one of the reasons why the then President Yanukovych had to pause to consider whether or not he wanted Ukraine to join the EU in 2014. He knew the amount of trade conducted between Russia and Ukraine was significant for Ukraine. Secondly, if Russia did want to conquer Ukraine, why would they start negotiations with Ukraine in Istanbul shortly after the start of the war? This is similar to what happened in Georgia in 2008, where the Russians negotiated to end the war with Georgia very quickly after the war had started. I believe this war lasted around 5 days. If Russia wanted to expand and take all of Europe, they would have certainly not wanted to negotiate to end the war so quickly after it had started. So these are the main reasons which have been put forward by John regarding the origins of this conflict. There are two other areas which I would like to consider, and this relates to the Nazification of Ukraine and also the failure of the Minsk agreement, which were also factors to consider in the war. However, I will cover this in a separate video.